Welcome back to another History with Hannah here at the Kelch Aviation Museum. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most thrilling chapters of aviation history, the golden age of air racing. The 1930s marked the golden age of air racing, a time when aviation was still young, daring, and wildly exciting. Air races weren't just spectator events. They were the testing grounds for technology, innovation, and human courage. The biggest stage was called the National Air Races, held in Cleveland, Ohio, starting in 1929. These races became the premier venue for competition, drawing enormous crowds, sometimes as large as 100,000 people, coming to watch these racers fly around pylons at breathtaking speeds. The events included a short closed pylon race, where pilots flew low and fast around markers on the ground, cross-country long-distance dashes like the Bendix Trophy that tested endurance and navigation, and technical challenges that rewarded people for their engineering skill, daring innovation, and speed. The aircraft themselves were marvels of design. Airplanes like the GB Super Sportster had an enormous engine and a small, compact frame, sacrificing safety and comfort for raw performance. Aircraft designers pioneered streamlined fuselages, retractable landing gear, and highly aerodynamic wings, all innovations that would later impact both military and commercial airlines. Here at the Kelch Aviation Museum, we have a racing airplane in need of restoration. It was built by John Thompson in the early 1930s, and he named it the Thompson Roth Special. This airplane that you see here was built by John when he was still a teenager. He was inspired by big names at the time, such as Jimmy Doolittle, Roscoe Turner, and Frank Hawks. John dreamed of creating and racing a small airplane. And to make this happen, John recruited one of his best friends, Bud Roth. And together, they took over John's parents' garage and built this thing from scratch. In 1937, John entered the Miami All-American Air Maneuvers in the light plane division. However, there weren't enough people in that category that had signed up, so they had to consolidate all of the other categories into one. Suddenly, John is competing against these super highly rated pilots and their big, powerful airplanes in his tiny home-built biplane. To keep track of his laps, John put 10 pieces of tape on his instrument panel, taking off a piece after each lap completed. But in the excitement of the event, he lost track, and while he was still circling the course, all the other pilots had landed and were enjoying refreshments on the ground. Needless to say, John did not win that day. But his story highlights his lifelong passion and determination within aviation. John Thompson is not a famous name, nor did he break any records or win any major races, but he's the perfect example of that can-do, scrappy attitude that so many early aviators had in such a world-changing time. But of course, airplanes were only half of the story. The real excitement came from the pilots who flew them. Air races attracted and provided a proving ground for some of the most famous aviators of the day, such as Jimmy Doolittle, who won the Thompson Trophy in 1932 flying his GBR-1 at over 296 miles per hour. He wasn't just a daredevil. He was a brilliant test pilot who later led the Doolittle raid in World War II. Roscoe Turner, with his movie star looks, pencil mustache, and larger-than-life personality, won 3 Thompson trophies and often flew with his pet lion named Gilmore, which made him unforgettable to spectators. Benny Howard, a self-taught designer who raced his own creations, the Howard Pete and the Howard Mike. He later went on to found the Howard Aircraft Corporation, known for quality civilian aircraft. Frank Hawks, more famous for setting speed records than pylon racing, but still a prominent name in the 1930s aviation scene. And there were colorful characters such as Douglas Wrongway Corrigan, who in 1938 accidentally flew over the Atlantic Ocean. While not a top racer, he embodied the quirky spirit of the aviation era at the time. And let's not forget about the women who made their mark. In spite of social limitations and hostility towards what was considered a male-dominated field, women were racing and breaking records too. Louise Theton, who in 1936 won the Bendix Trophy race, beating all of the men in a cross-country dash. She also co-founded the 99s with Amelia Earhart to support women in aviation. Amelia Earhart herself competed in races, including the 1929's Women's Air Derby, nicknamed the Powder Puff Derby. These races helped define her fame before her record-setting flights. Pancho Barnes was a fearless pilot who broke Amelia Earhart's airspeed record in 1930. Known for her bold personality and her exceptional flying skills, she competed in many air races during the 1930s. Later, she founded the Happy Bottom Riding Club, a famous gathering place for test pilots in California's Mojave Desert. Blanche Noyes, a pilot and a skilled mechanic. She competed in the 1929 Women's Air Derby and later teamed up with Louise Theton to win the Bendix Trophy race in 1936. Noyes became one of the first women to work for the Civil Aeronautics Authority, promoting safety and education. Ruth Nichols. She set multiple speed, altitude, and distance records in the early 1930s, becoming the only woman to hold all three simultaneously. She participated in a few air races and was one of the few women to fly transport aircraft at the time. Nichols also founded Relief Wings, a humanitarian aviation organization. Florence Klingensmith, a daring competitor from North Dakota. She was one of the first women to enter the men's air races. She set multiple speed and endurance records before tragically passing away in the 1933 Chicago National Air Race. Her courage inspired future generations of women pilots. This engine, small but very powerful, changed the game for smaller racing aircraft. It's inverted, four-cylinder, inline aircraft engine. Manufactured by Menasco Motor Company in Burbank, California, and was designed in the early 1930s. At a time when light airplanes were usually powered by big, bulky radial engines, Al Menasco's inline design provided a much slimmer look, better aerodynamics, less drag, and far more visibility over the nose. All qualities that are perfectly suited for air racing. The Menasco Pirate quickly became a favorite among the Goodyear midget racers and other small class competitions in the 1930s. These races emphasized affordability and accessibility to pilots and designers without having huge costs like big engines that would traditionally go into something like a GB. The Menasco Pirate earned the reputation as the little engine that could. It wasn't the fastest, nor was it the biggest, but it enabled an entirely new category of low-cost, streamlined air racers. This engine kept competition alive during the Depression years. In the late 1930s, the Menasco actually started producing more powerful engines, such as the Menasco Buccaneer, and it also offered supercharged modifications. This kept the engine relevant and in the racing scene. However, after World War II, there were larger radials and eventually jet engines that just outclassed the Menasco. Even so, the Menasco's impact on air racing in the 1930s was significant. This particular engine, serial number 131, was used by Art Chester in his Chester Special Racer, used to race in the 1932 National Air Races. It would later go on to break speed records, going as fast as 237 miles per hour. This engine only has 54 hours on it and has been factory overhauled. The National Air Races were more than just air races. They were week-long aviation festivals that promoted public interest in aviation and pushed for innovations of design. For many Americans, the races symbolized progress and pride during the Great Depression. Pilots became national celebrities, and manufacturers used the event to test radical new ideas. And the atmosphere? Imagine a county fair mixed with the Indy 500 and the Super Bowl, except in the sky. Crowds filled the grandstands, announcers made play-by-plays over megaphones, vendors sold aviation souvenirs, all while the roar of engines shook the ground. For nearly 2 decades, the National Air Races defined aviation by blending competition, entertainment, and innovation. But all golden ages come to an end. So why did air racing stop? First, there were safety concerns. The airplanes were thrilling, but they were also dangerous. With their compact frames and enormous engines, they were notoriously tricky to fly. And sadly, sometimes both pilots and spectators were killed. Second is World War II. When America entered World War II in 1941, pilots, designers, and factories had to turn all of their efforts towards the war. And when the war was over, we had moved into the jet age. So old-style pylon racing had become outdated. Third, public interest. In the 1930s, air racing was new and it was exciting. But in the 1940s, people had started to explore other aviation frontiers, such as breaking the sound barrier, space exploration, and even flying across the country commercially. Aviation was no longer a spectacle to people, it was a part of daily life. Fourth, the cost. Building competitive race planes had become way too expensive for the individual or even a small workshop. Without strong sponsorships, many small teams could not keep up. But the legacy of air racing lives on. The innovation born on those race courses helped shape the aircraft that fought in World War II and commercial airliners that still connect the world today. Perhaps more importantly, the daring spirit of those men and women alike that continue to inspire us. Their determination paved the way for future generations of pilots, engineers, and aerospace leaders, proving that skill and courage know no gender. This has been History with Hannah, air racing here at the Kelch Aviation Museum. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, keep looking up.